Hello and welcome to the agenda. I am Ajay Kaul. Today we will discuss about China's bigger game plan against India. China has launched aggression against India not only militarily on the Ladakh border, but it is also moving aggressively to wean away India's small neighbors either by lure or by force. China is making efforts to influence these small neighbors like Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, which have been enjoying a kind of patronage from India all through. China is giving out loans to these countries to put them in debt trap, and in cases where the lure of money does not work, it is grabbing territories like it has done in Bhutan and Nepal. So how serious is this situation strategically for India? We will try to analyze this in the agenda today. We have with us former diplomat Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar and Mr. Jitendra Kumar Oja, who is an expert on geostrategic matters. But before we begin our conversation, let's have a look at this small report.
While everybody's focus is on China's military aggression on the Ladakh border, its bigger game plan against India cannot be ignored. The game plan is reflected by its aggressive attempt to wean away India's small neighbors who have enjoyed a kind of patronage all through. The countries being tapped by China are Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. These countries are being influenced by China through the lure of loans or the threat of force, or both. In Nepal especially, China's influence has grown manifold in the recent times, and in turn it casts a shadow on the age-old relationship between Nepal and India. The Indo-Nepal relationship dipped to an all-time low when the KP Sharma Oli government raked up the border dispute with India earlier this year and issued a new map of the country showing areas like Kalapani and Lipulek as part of Nepal. India had to move swiftly and carefully to prevent the situation from going out of hand. It's another matter that the Oli government allowed Chinese influence to grow even as China has grabbed about 36 hectares of its land. Sri Lanka is another nation where the government has become too inclined towards China, which made inroads in the island nation by constructing Hambantota port. It has now given a loan of $90 million to Sri Lanka for revamping its healthcare, education and water systems. This is seen as an effort to gain influence through debt trap, but the Sri Lankan government does not agree since it badly needs funds. China also reached out to Bangladesh by providing a loan of $1 billion for the Teesta River Management Project. This was clearly to exploit the situation since a proceed agreement between Bangladesh and India on Teesta River water sharing is in limbo. Bhutan did not fall for the lure of loans etc. and refused to do anything against the interests of India. So China has grabbed a small border village of Bhutan. This was apparently to send out a message to the tiny nation to fall in line, especially since Bhutan is refusing to sign an agreement on Doklam border as per the Chinese dictate. Doklam has strategic importance for India. Considering the game plan of China, authorities in India will need to charge up and ensure that its traditional ties and influence on these small neighbors is not lost. Bureau Report.
Now let's welcome our guests Ambassador Sajanhar and Mr. Oja. Welcome to the program, sirs.
Thank you.
I'll begin by asking Ambassador Sajanhar, as I mentioned earlier, that China has not launched only military aggression against India, it is also trying to wean away India's small neighbors. Like we have seen, it is trying to do a lot in Nepal. In Bhutan, it has been trying, and it has now built a village here in Bhutan. And we know about Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. So what is your view on this?
Well, China has been trying this for a long time. It's not that it has started only very recently. But, as it came to be called what was known as the string of pearls around India, trying to get also ports, seaports, develop them. We've seen how Hambantota was developed. We've seen how under the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, the Gwadar port is being developed. Also, very recently, we've seen in Myanmar the Chakfu port is being developed. And you're very right, as far as Bangladesh is concerned, as far as Nepal is concerned, there also China is trying to make forays. China is trying to enhance its access by providing loans, not as grants, but as loans which the countries would be required to return for creating infrastructure or for importing defense equipment. So this, of course, is a challenge because if it comes with the lessening of India's influence, and of course, as far as India's strategic interests in the region are concerned, it is a matter of great concern. But India has also, picked up the gauntlet, taken up the challenge, and India has also a large number of strengths as far as this region is concerned. Because whether it is Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, all these countries, there is a long historical, cultural, civilizational connect that we have with these countries. Of course, in between, there has also been this small country, big country syndrome, where the smaller countries look upon India at times as sort of a big brother. And so there have been some friction between the two, between these countries and India. But India has been now proactively working on this. And, if you'd like to go in the course of your program as far as India's relations individually with all these countries are concerned, also as far as some of the regional organizations, like the BBIN, BIMSTEC, of course, unfortunately, SARC is not working. But with all these, India has been proactively trying to engage, and I think with positive results.
Okay, before I come back to you, I'll ask Mr. Oja the same question. How do you see that encircling by China?
Well, Chinese have been working on a long-term strategy or a long-term policy, you can say, and there's a very high degree of continuity in that strategy or policy, I would say. And strategically, we have not been prepared until recently, I would say. We allowed this asymmetry of all-round power to grow in favor of China for a long time. And now suddenly the situation has come. Of course, technically, we are responding in a far better way. Things are favorable as far as we are concerned. But Chinese national security establishment, I would say, they have this element of continuity is there, that they have managed to, come out with internal governance restructuring to bolster their overall national power. So they certainly this 4.5 times of stronger economic power, technological innovation, military modernization, on which they are embarked upon. These position them, or these give them a unique strength. They have their advantage, but at the same time they have antagonized the whole world. Regarding our smaller neighbors, I would say have always maintained we needed a different framework to handle them, because culturally and civilizationally they are I would say they're part of same civilization, whether it's Bangladesh or Sri Lanka or Nepal or Bhutan. These are concerned. We needed a little different approach, I would say. It would not be sufficient for diplomacy alone to manage this. We would need stronger governance capacities, strong economic powers, high would have high quality institutions which could harness things. So there we are at a disadvantage, out about it. And China is always perceived, if we geostrategic or geopolitical calculation, China would not like India to come up and pose to their long-term agenda or long-term plan. Much before this thing, not only I, but so many of us in the strategy of India have been saying that this kind of situation of conflict with China is inevitable. Right now, it was going on at a slower pace, in an indirect way, but this direct confrontation was inevitable. Have not been very cognizant of this reality, I would say. But at the moment, I see we are doing very well within the circumstances. Nepal has also changed its position. Sri Lanka has also become aware of the debt trap. Bangladesh, of course, some errors have happened. I would say that we should never ever have placed Bangladesh and Pakistan in the same category, because Sheikh Hasina has really tried her best to wipe out Islamic radicalism from the soil of Bangladesh. Our best friend, but I hope that whatever the questions that have crept in for some time, that can be done away with. And we can see that these neighbors of India, they do not cede their territory to China in any way for any activity that is hostile to India. Rather, Maldives, we have seen already that new MDP regime
away with strong pro-China policy that President Yamin was following. So to that extent, it is all right, but I would say that in long term, we have to have a stronger strategic approach. We have to not only manage our diplomatic ties better, but also bolster our internal governance capacity. And this would involve, I've always maintained, involve large number of reforms and restructuring of institutions, because we cannot, at the kind of which are having with China, this kind of power cannot be afforded at all. No great country can afford this thing, Ajay ji.
Yeah, okay. I'll go back to Ambassador Sajjan. As Mr. Ojha mentioned about that, we need to have a relook at maybe our policies. But as I may point out that, as you mentioned about the big brother, that concept they had, all these small countries have been complaining about big brother attitude by India, and kind of, is it now they are trying to make India compete with China so that they share the dependence on India? Would it be like that?
Well, let me put it this way. This big brother syndrome that has been there for a long time, because if you look at it, the whole rationale for bringing together SARC in 1985 was this, that all these 7 countries, we are aware of Chanakya's Mandala theory, that, your neighbor is always, you have problems, you have enemies, and your neighbor's neighbor is your friend. So all these countries, the members of SARC, they all have borders, either maritime or land boundaries with India, and none of them have land boundary or maritime borders with each other. So it was very good, that all these countries came together. Initially, as you know, India was a little reluctant in bringing together, but then after that, we took it up very proactively, very sincerely, in good faith. But now, because of late, we have seen that Pakistan has been engaging in terrorism against India, against Afghanistan, against Bangladesh. That is why SARC has really not been able to make much headway. So this is as far as the big brother syndrome is concerned. But the other aspect also is that many of these countries want to play what is called the China card. That is, they want to get benefit from both the parties, both India as well as from China, which I think is all right. Many small countries do that. If you look at in Central Asia, what they call, this is the multi-vector foreign policy. They have excellent relations with their neighbors. For instance, Kazakhstan, it has excellent relations with China as also with Russia. And they take advantage from both of them. So these smaller countries also would like to take advantage from both India and China, which in my view, to an extent, is all right, as long as it does not adversely impinge upon my core strategic and security interests. And I think this is a message. These are the red lines that have been communicated to these countries. But of late, coming beyond that, of late, I think we've become very proactive in recent years, and we've been reaching out to these countries. Just to give you an example, as far as Nepal is concerned, because you had mentioned this and Mr. Ojha had also mentioned this, when Prime Minister Modi visited Nepal in August 2014, after coming to power.
I accompanied and I covered that visit.
So, okay, good.
Yes.
So you know that.
Yeah.
You know the details of that visit.
Yes.
That was the first bilateral prime ministerial visit from India after a gap of 17 years.
And I saw the euphoria. I saw the euphoria there.
Yes, euphoria. Absolutely, absolutely. And both in Nepal and in Bhutan, there were holiday. There was it was like 2 days holiday was announced there. So, and after that, Prime Minister Modi has gone there in November of 2014. He went for the SARC summit. And after that, he has traveled on bilateral basis to that country. When he traveled in 2015 March to Sri Lanka, that again was the first Indian prime ministerial bilateral visit after a gap of 33 years.
Right.
So, when you have neighbors, you really have to look after them. You have to nourish them. You have
so
to
in fact
them.
that was my supplementary question, because I wanted to ask whether India has been complacent, like we are a big brother, they are small neighbors, and we have been laxed because of complacency, and China is taking advantage of that. That was my actual question, supplementary question I want.
Yeah, I think at the moment, yes, till about a few years ago, as I mentioned, this is exactly what was happening because we thought we were complacent that this is our backyard and no one can really impinge here. But now we have seen that China is coming in. And I remember when I was posted in Dhaka, this was way back in 1992, 94. And those our interlocutors in Bangladesh, they used to tell me that India does not have time for us because 90% of your time, as far as neighbors are concerned, is spent on your relations with Pakistan.
Right.
So they said, if we want to attract your attention, do you want us also to behave the same manner as which in which Pakistan behaves with you? So this is what was happening. But I think now there is enough attention that is being given to our neighbors as far as Sri Lanka and Maldives. Both of them have articulated their India first policy, their India first strategy. You see, Mr. Doval was there very recently for this trilateral meeting, maritime
Right.
cooperation. In Bangladesh, we had our foreign secretary. In
But at
Nepal, also, we had
but
our
sir,
foreign secretary.
but at the same time, I may point out the Chinese defense minister is traveling all over this our neighbors. He visited
Okay,
Nepal. He has visited
I'm sure
Pakistan.
you I'm sure you want to I'm sure you want to go to Mr. Oja also, but let me
Yeah.
just very quickly respond to that. There have been three very high level visits from India to Nepal in a space of 1 month. It is very, very unusual.
Right.
First, you have the director of RANAW, then you have the chief of army staff, and then you have the foreign secretary within a space of a few weeks. So I think that is indicative of the seriousness and the good faith with which India is working with Nepal and other neighbors to
Right.
take forward our relationship. And in fact, why the Chinese foreign minister came there? Because I think they got worried. China got worried that India and Nepal are once again resetting their relationship, which would be against their interest.
Okay, Mr. Oja, as we talked about complacency, India's complacency. So has India been kind of neglecting our neighbors, small neighbors who used to look up to us for maybe help or maybe assistance or maybe other ways? What do you say on that?
I would say it is not that there's complacency. There are some inbuilt flaws in our institutions, not only in civil service but everywhere. These are of a rather, I would say, 100-year-old vintage. These should have come to a different level, and scope for complacency or scope for discretion should have been eliminated. Should have structured it in a different way. Secondly, I would also say that we need to change our approach to our smaller neighbors because there was in the past, a lot of our political leaders and others used to condemn these neighbors. So that must not happen. We should be holding ourselves responsible for security of these states. At the same time, ensuring them that we look after and getting a commitment, not only a commitment, but ensuring that their territory is not used for anything which is anti-India. Because as the ambassador pointed it out, that these countries share maritime or land only with us. These are much smaller. China has absolutely no business to come to these countries. The fact is that Chinese have amassed so much of financial muscle, technological prowess, and overall influence otherwise that they are able to build pockets of support. They have a very different ways of getting their own regimes there. And as we said, that they have been working out with a very stronger strategic agenda, and that strategic agenda, others may disagree, but I sincerely believe that strategic agenda involves keeping India in such a condition that India does not pose any threat to them. So I think we need a change in approach at one level. We have some of the most brilliant people in our civil service and especially foreign service. We have some of the most brilliant diplomats. Should be proud of them. But at the same time, there is no
No,
competition
Mr.
in civil
Oja,
service as such.
we
Our civil just let me
yeah.
complete. Just let me complete. So that is one area. If we make it more professionally structured, I'm sure that we would not have allowed situation like this to come up. But diplomacy is not the only thing. Economic capacity, technological prowess, your overall strength of other institutions, these are also your strength of the corporate sector or private sector. These are also playing a very critical role shaping both your national security strategy as well as diplomacy. So, we cannot say that, yes, we have been complacent, we talk to them and everything will be, I'm sorry, it's not going to work out that way.
No, diplomacy, we discuss about diplomacy and financial aspects are all right. But as Ambassador Sajjan pointed out, that Prime Ministerial visit, bilateral Prime Ministerial visit did not take place over decades. So there is a messaging in that. So when a small country looks up to you and your Prime Minister doesn't come to a smaller, they have that kind of feeling of neglect that, okay, they are taking us for granted.
Uh, yes, yeah, and not only that, this is what I mentioned, that previous era, the senior political leadership, they were saying, oh, we are surrounded by failed states. That's a very bad statement to make. And certainly not looking after them was, of course, a mistake. What has happened, at one level, we have the intent, we are making gestures, but at another level, as I said, we need capacity also. Simply, words will not sufficient, because these countries they do require fund, and if you think that there is some possibility of getting financial support or otherwise something from China, we certainly go for that. But yes, they have of late realizing that whatever support they get from China is not a unconditional support, it is not a kind of gesture of goodwill which they have been having from India, but these countries are also under pressure. And at the same time, you also have to acknowledge that not only South Asia, but everywhere Chinese have been subverting open societies. They have been clandestinely creating pockets of support, rather subverting media. Not only these countries, but even in developed countries like Europe or Australia, they have built this kind of support structure. So Chinese have a way of doing it, and I suppose that in leadership in South Asia also, they have to rally India. There have been some positive changes, but yes, there is no doubt that present Prime Minister had showed a lot of generosity, vision, and commitment to look after our smaller neighbors. But that thing has to be matched by capacity, and that capacity cannot be generated overnight. There has to be in that direction.
Okay, Mr. Ojha, you just mentioned about that we should ensure their security of the small countries. And if we talk about Bhutan, and when we read about reports that China has built a village, or maybe it is populating a village inside Bhutan, and if India is ensuring their security, India is kind of, we are kind of silent or maybe not doing anything, and which apparently has strategic implications on our Doklam tri-junction. So what do you say on that?
I say I always maintain that there is for a total change in our approach. We should not be responsive alone. We have to acknowledge one fact that we can neither live in peace with Pakistan nor can we live in peace with China. As a civilization, we are going to be either decimated or we will emerge as victorious. And that kind of strategic thinking has been missing in political leadership of previous generations. And even if it is now there in the political leadership, I'm sorry to say that at institutional level, that kind of vision, that kind of capacity to rather push through changes that are required, those have not been happening. Because why should only China come here and make a challenge? We cannot afford to be pacifists that, okay, you keep on doing whatever, and if something is harm, only then we will do it. If need be there, look, Kautilya had said, Ambassador pointed out by a man mentioned Kautilya. Kautilya said that you have to keep an eye not only on your adversaries, but also in countries which are neutral.
Right.
And wherever, and not only one this thing, sometimes you have to use unconventional, innovative methods, and you use such means where a fully mobilized army also cannot achieve those objectives. So everything is justified in on national security, for defense of national security. We should stop being reactive. We have to acknowledge if they're doing something here, we have to put multiple pressures on them. Offense is the only defense, Ajay. Our whole approach as a state and civilization has been very reactive and defensive.
Yeah.
We have to come out of it because, our life may be of 30 years, 40 years, or 100 years. The life of a civilization is of many centuries. And we are doing a serious harm by this kind of reactive approach and not being able to manage internal discords, I would say.
Right. I want to go to Mr. Ambassador Sajjan. As you heard Mr. Ojha saying that we need a rethink and maybe new thinking. So in that context, if as you mentioned, the SAARC has failed. It's a gone grouping, and BIMSTEC, as you mentioned, I guess it's a non-starter. It's going nowhere. So in that context, given the Chinese aggression, do you think India should think about some new grouping, maybe including these countries, leaving alone aside Pakistan?
No, definitely. I think in that context, BIMSTEC was the one preferred organization, that we had that we had focused upon. You would remember that in October 2016, when we had India hosted the BRICS summit, then in Goa we had invited the leaders of the
BIMSTEC, yeah.
BRICS countries,
Yeah.
of BIMSTEC, sorry,
Yeah.
BIMSTEC countries. So there also, and now even when
The
the
swearing in
second
ceremony.
inauguration, that is
Yeah.
swearing in ceremony last year, there also we invited the leaders of the BIMSTEC. So I think BIMSTEC has the potential, BIMSTEC has possibility, and we really need to focus on. I don't think we really need to look at newer organizations, newer groupings. This grouping is there very much here with us, and I think we can really work on it. We have also worked on the sub-regional grouping of BBIN, and there also it has given us good results. Of course, there are fissures that we see in all of these, and I think the responsibility really lies upon India, because India is the biggest country, not only in terms of territory, not only in terms of population, not only in terms of the economic heft, but otherwise, I think in global influence, whether it is BIMSTEC or BBIN. So I think India has to play its role, but it has to get its mind space there. And we have to put up, we have to set our economy in order.
Right.
Just one comment let me make here, and that is in the context of even bilateral relations. Even if China is out of the equation, I remember I used to be in Bangladesh in the early 90s. And at that time, China was nowhere really on the horizon. But there also, you see, like Mr. Oli did at this time, to appeal to pander to hyper nationalism when his own position was at risk, in threat, in danger.
Right.
Then he appealed to pander hyper nationalism by raising this map question by Lipule, Kalapani, even saying that, Lord Ram belonged to Nepal and not to India. So there is a competitive anti-Indianism that I have seen in many of these countries.
Right.
In Bangladesh, for instance, even Awami League, which is a very good friend of India, but when there was a confrontation with the BNP, that also, it felt compelled to become anti-Indian. It's only now, since 2009, that Sheikh Hasina has been in position, and she has behaved in a very statesman-like manner, and she is taking forward the relations
Right.
with India. But there are challenges. These small countries, we have to deal with them very subtle, very finished, very sophisticated, very sensitive way. And I think that is what is beginning to happen now with Maldives, with Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, and all the other countries.
Okay, so we are running out of time. Brief comment from Mr. Oja. As I mentioned, is there a need for a new grouping? Brief comment, sir.
Certainly, there is need for regrouping and multiple grouping, and I would say wherever possible, with whomsoever we can reach some understanding, we have to reach out to them and work out this understanding, because China's current political system threatens all the countries in this region and beyond, as well as it threatens people internally. But they have managed to build a very ruthless and need to have a look at their own governance institutions, I would say. We need internal restructuring of some of the institutions to make them more professional. We have a pool of extremely talented people, our educated middle class, they are highly talented. We this culture of leadership and harness our overall national productivity, harness their talent into higher level of national productivity. Technically, we are doing better, I would say, reaching out to all these neighbors. These are good for short term, but in long term, we have to have a change in approach, and we have to have a change in the whole governance structure. We cannot afford to be complacent. We cannot afford to be reactive. We cannot afford to be responsive. We have to have a clear vision and agenda, and we have to pursue these in a more aggressive manner.
Yeah, we need a new thinking and strategic outlook and sustained manner we have to follow up. But our time is up. Thank you both of you for participating in this debate, sir.
Thank you very much.
This is all in the agenda today. Thanks for watching. I'll be back with another important topic tomorrow. Till then, goodbye.